What are your top tips for mainstreaming gender in Cash and Voucher Assistance?
Con respecto a la incorporación del enfoque de género en los proyectos de Cash, es importante tener en cuenta: si es una intervención dirigida a sobrevivientes de violencia basada en género, estas intervenciones pueden salvar vidas. Esto puede hacerse por medio de la focalización de las mujeres sobrevivientes o trabajando de manera articulada con agencias, ONGs e instituciones públicas para la referenciación de los casos. Incluir en los proyectos de Cash grupos focales mixtos, lo que disminuye la violencia intrafamiliar y aumenta el periodo de protección más allá de las épocas de distribución. Trabajar con actores clave a lo largo del ciclo del programa. Monitorear y evaluar los riesgos de violencia basada en género asociados a los proyectos de Cash. Trabajar con actores claves para incluir dentro de los casos la asistencia con Cash. Ahora bien, los riesgos de estas intervenciones pueden ser: aumentar la violencia contra las mujeres, marginalizar a las mujeres en sus comunidades, lo que aumenta los riesgos de violencia basada en género. Los proyectos de Cash pueden aumentar la tensión entre población migrante o retornada y las comunidades de acogida. Y los proyectos de Cash que no incluyen acciones de protección pueden aumentar los riesgos de violencia basada en género. Esperamos que estas respuestas les hayan servido.
I'd say number one is be contextual. Context is everything. Don't go off of global assumptions or old stereotypes. Two is you have to talk to people. Talk to women and men if it's relevant to your intervention. Talk to adolescent girls and adolescent boys too. And finally, make use of all the amazing resources out there. You can search Twitter for #GenderCash or get involved with the Grand Bargain Cash Workstream subgroup on gender. There is so much out there that's just incredibly useful.
A very important step is implementing a project design is to do a gender analysis, analyzing women and men have different needs and challenges in emergency. Analyzing this during project design and implementation is essential to implementing a program that can support both women and men equal. So, of course, the CVA is told that can help overcome gender inequality and inequality. This analysis tell us about poor relation and gender roles within the household and the community.
When we are doing now in Cash for Work, we include now gender, and in order to avoid protection. Sometimes happen that if we only share this activity for Cash for Work to only male or only a female, the other gender will be left behind. So to avoid that, we include both the Cash for Work activities for both male and female can do the work if they can do so. At the same time, when we are just sending the money, everybody will be sending his or her number through. In case now, for example, sometimes what happened in the field, and a female can take the Cash for Work, can participate the Cash for Work. At the same time, the number she gives us is to belong by her husband, and the husband can use the money. Sometimes having now a conflict between the family. You can see that the person can call now the agency back and claiming that the money you send used through someone else who cannot do the work. This is the kind of scenario or challenge we face in the field. But so this is sometimes what complaints we receive, and we always encourage the female to participate the Cash for Work if they are able, and if they are not able, and we look for unconditional cash transfer in order not to feel achilles that some they receive for Cash for Work and others they cannot participate. The Cash for Work, they are vulnerable, they are poor, and they are needy. So these people, we can select for them as unconditional cash transfer so that they can benefit and everybody will receive an equal opportunity to participate both. If this person is unable to participate the Cash for Work, we give him through unconditional cash transfer so he can benefit and get this.
I think close and context-sensitive attention to gender and vulnerability in the design, implementation, and monitoring is essential for every cash assistance initiative. you know, you need to really consider gender considerations in your needs assessment, in your desk review, in the risk vulnerability and capacity analysis, in terms of the eligibility criteria and targeting, through the market analysis, modality, and the delivery mechanism. And of course, designing, implementation, and monitoring. And you know, we have a lot of tools to do this. So it's really applying existing tools on gender in your programming. It's really about good programming, and through every step through the program cycle to consider gender, also in terms of then the cash assistance. I think another point that is very important is, of course, or a precondition is disaggregated data. If we don't have solid disaggregated data, it's much harder to do gender sensitive programming, and this is sometimes missing in some operations. Of course, the final thing to sort of monitor all of this and address gender issues is to have appropriate feedback mechanism and monitoring in place. And that also has to pay attention to disaggregated data by sex and age and disability and other diversity characteristics, of course.
Los PTM que funcionan para las mujeres se basan en un sólido análisis de género. Además, estos no solo deben estar diseñados para ellas, sino que es más importante realizarlos con ellas y que estén concebidos para protegerlas. Además, es una manera para transformar la manera sostenible de los roles de género y las relaciones de poder. También se debería considerar aumentar la capacidad de las finanzas a largo plazo en los programas de transferencias monetarias para las mujeres.
I think the big risk is to assume you understand the gender relations in a particular context. We always need to talk to men and women, and if there's time and capacity, boys and girls as well, about how their society works and about how the gender relations play out in that particular context. We must talk to people in advance. We need a proper gender analysis to understand who does what. It's really easy to not see women as being economically active, economically productive. It's also really easy to underestimate their work burdens because so much of it is just seen as women's work and it shouldn't count. It's just what they do. But this is, you know, this is people's time and energy. So always do a gender analysis, always collect gender disaggregated data. Try and make sure that people collecting the data aren't all one sex, all one gender. Try and make sure that there are women out there and there are men out there and that they are talking to men and women separately, because often in a very sort of hierarchical society, women will be quiet in front of men, or poor women will be quiet in front of better off women. So try and make sure you really get feedback from a wide range of different types of people in your planning and in your monitoring and in your evaluation. And program separately for women. Mainstreaming doesn't mean just integrating thinking about gender into any programming. It also means programming for gender equality.
Well, the key tip, first of all, which may sound a very stupid one, is make sure you talk to women. Hold focus group discussions and key informant interviews one-on-one with the affected population and with women in the affected population. Don't assume you know their issues, but also don't assume that they will talk openly in front of men. When I was in the cash working group in Yemen, we did studies, and it was very clear there was a big difference for how women answered questions if they were in a focus group discussion with only women, or with focus group discussions with women and men, or in fact, if it was just one-on-one, you could get very different answers. And don't assume you know what their issues are going to be. Even within a small geographical area, depending on their social class or their ethnic background, women are not a homogeneous group. There can be multiple challenges of women, which may be, if you do a focus group discussion in one part of the country or one region, you may identify some. But it doesn't mean that information will stay the same all 12 months of your program, and it doesn't mean it will stay the same in all areas of the operation. Too often in CaLP, we find out our issues through post-distribution monitoring and through complaints response mechanisms. Again, one thing I said is there are common issues with CaLP, and quite often we spend a lot of time creating mechanisms for perceived issues that are commonly impact women in one particular context, which don't impact them in this context, but there is a different issue that we're not putting our time and energy engaging on.
Existen tres momentos claves para incorporar la perspectiva de género en los programas de transferencias monetarias: el proceso de selección de los beneficiarios, el monitoreo y la evaluación del proyecto. En el proceso de la selección de los beneficiarios, se sugiere privilegiar a las familias que tengan una mujer embarazada o lactando, o las familias que, en su caso, la mujer es quien aporta la mayor parte de los ingresos. En el proceso de monitoreo se sugieren dos actividades. La primera es desagregar todos los datos por sexo, y la segunda recomendación es, si el recurso lo reciben las mujeres, es que los instrumentos de seguimiento se agreguen preguntas sobre si la entrega se ha modificado las dinámicas familiares o han existido situaciones de violencia al interior del hogar o en las comunidades derivadas de la recepción del recurso. Y por último, en la evaluación se sugiere analizar los datos bajo una perspectiva de género, es decir, analizar al menos si la forma utilizada del recurso y los beneficiarios son diferentes entre hombres y mujeres.